Well, I'm joined now by Zia Yusuf, Home Affairs spokesman for Reform UK. Zia, I know you're stuck in traffic because of the tube strike. You were hoping to join us on the sofa, so apologies about that, but thanks for being with us. Just first, the Nowak family said yesterday outside the courtroom that they didn't want the murder of their son to be used to stoke division. Isn't that exactly what you're doing?
My heart goes out to him and to Henry's entire family. I can only imagine what they're going through. What Reform and Nigel are doing is quite the opposite of that, Cathy. What we're trying to do is advocate for an end to two-tier policing and for a Britain in which you're treated the same, regardless of what religion you are or what race you are. That is what we've been advocating for. Well, no, that is exactly what we've been advocating for.
It's not quite that simple, though, is it? Because Nigel Farage issued a statement on camera calling for people to respond with pure, cold rage. That's incitement, isn't it?
Did you watch the body cam footage, Cathy?
I did watch the body cam footage, and I also watched Nigel Farage's statement.
And what emotions did you feel? Cathy, what emotion did you feel having watched it?
I'm asking you whether that's incitement.
With respect, I'm asking you what emotion you felt having watched the body cam
I'm conducting this interview, so I'm asking you
Henry Nowak being read his
incitement.
rights having been arrested, Cathy. Henry Nowak's the last words Henry heard on this earth were his rights having been arrested by the police, bleeding to death. And my question to you, genuinely, it's a sincere question, human to human, Cathy.
Zia,
how did you feel watching that footage?
Zia, if you could let me ask my question, it's absolutely heartbreaking, and that is why the family said they wanted to turn that into something that would not create more division. I'm asking you if Nigel Farage suggesting to people that they feel cold, pure cold rage, is that inciting people to feel anger?
Well, Cathy, you have not answered my question, which is what emotion did you feel having watched that body cam footage?
I'm interviewing you, so I would like you to ask that question. Is that incitement or not? It's simple.
OK, well, I will tell you, having watched that footage myself, I was furious about it. I think millions of people in this country of all sorts of races and religions, based on the people who are speaking to me and sending me messages constantly, they were absolutely furious about it as well, because it was a crystal clear example of two-tier policing. And how on earth the police, upon attending the scene, took more seriously an accusation of racism than an accusation of having been stabbed. Poor Henry said repeatedly to the police, that I've been stabbed. And the police said, and this is burnt into my memory now, it's so horrifying, the police responded with, I quote, "I don't think you have, mate." So the burden of proof was on Henry to prove that he had been stabbed, and yet there was no burden of proof on the murderer who had accused Henry of racism. And if that doesn't make you angry,
if I could just ask a question, because otherwise we're not. This is supposed to be a conversation. I'm not saying that I'm not angry. My heart is broken for the family, of course, and it is enraging. I understand that, but I'm asking about the fact that politicians are stoking this anger has consequences, doesn't it? You know, there is a police officer who is in hiding because of death threats. He was mistaken as someone who was involved in this, and he wasn't, and he's now in hiding. You know, do you condemn calls for some kind of vigilante justice against the police officers involved here? Do you condemn that?
Sorry, who's calling for vigilante justice against officers? There
are death threats online circulating. There's misinformation circulating online. Do you condemn that? Do you sympathise with the police officer who's in hiding?
Of course I would condemn that, and I take exception to this notion that connecting that with anything that Nigel said. But are you saying, Cathy, that it is inappropriate to take anger that people feel as a result of this tragedy for political purposes? Is that what you're putting to me?
I'm listening to what the family has said, and they said they don't want this terrible tragedy to be used to stoke division. And that is what we have. We have this huge political row now. We have Nigel Farage making claims that white lives matter, which is a slogan that was used by, the UK's largest white supremacist group. Are you happy with him using that phrase?
Cathy, what Nigel Farage said today was that white lives matter as much as black lives. Do you disagree with that statement?
You seem to be conducting an interview with me, but I'm trying to ask you the question.
I'm asking you whether you disagree with the statement
because you're the politician.
I'm correcting, with respect, Cathy, I'm correcting you on this, because to leave out the second half of the sentence, I think is deliberately misrepresentative and misleading. So Nigel said that white lives matter as much as black lives. And my question to you is, do you disagree with that statement?
And my question to you is about Nigel Farage's claims of anti-white prejudice. I mean, there is overwhelming evidence, isn't there, of police racism over the decades against black minority ethnic people. You've got to go back to the Scarman report, the Macpherson report, the Casey review. There are decades of racism by the police against black minority ethnic people. Do you accept that that is a fact?
I'm kind of stunned that you couldn't bring yourself to say that you agree with the statement that white lives matter as much as black lives. I can't understand why you can't just confirm you agree with that statement.
Zia, you're the senior member of a party. You're a politician. My job is to hold you to account, so I'm asking you these questions. And I would love you to answer that question about racism against black and minority ethnic people by the police. There are a lot of people who are angry because they see every day, you know, the stop and search data. They see that. They see the deaths of black people in police custody. And they're saying, where is your anger about that?
Well, again, I don't understand why you can't bring yourself to confirm that you agree with the statement that white lives matter as much as black lives. Clearly, it is unacceptable for anyone to be discriminated against based on immutable characteristics by the police or anybody else. But, you know, Cathy, you've been conducting this interview on a premise that it is wholly inappropriate to watch that body cam footage and be furious. It is wholly inappropriate to conclude from watching that body cam footage that there should be some political ramifications for this. When in 2021, Cathy, you wrote op-ed after op-ed, article after article in newspapers like The Independent about George Floyd. In fact, let me quote you your own words. You said that you were you expressed delight that the BLM hashtag transported, and this is a direct quote from you, Cathy, transported the rage of George Floyd's death across the four corners of the globe.
Zia,
so
I've said
the point
to
that we
you,
are making
Zia,
is that
I've said to you,
a totally different reaction,
angry,
a totally different reaction, Cathy, not just from you. I'm only putting that to you because I'm speaking to you now, but I'm afraid this has been endemic across most of the media landscape in this country and the institutions in this country. And the reality is this: because Henry was a white man, because Henry was a white man, because Henry was a white man,
you seem to be interviewing
simply unwilling
me,
to accept that this sort of thing exists.
Zia, I can see you're on broadcast mode, but if you'd listened to my monologue at the start of this show, I know you were on a rival show, so that was impossible for you. But I reflected on the public anger and the anger that people feel. But I also reflected on the concerns that MPs have, including the constituency MP of Henry Nowak, who is worried about that anger being stoked by politicians for their own ends, for political ends. I'm asking you about that. I'm reflecting on that. But I would also like to ask you about racism in the police, which we've just talked about. I mean, I wonder whether you think 92% of police officers in England and Wales are white. Do you think they are going to be guilty of systematic prejudice against white people? Do you think that's likely?
Not only is it likely, it's demonstrable. You can go to Hampshire Police's website as we speak. You can read their, quote, race action plan that, by the way, was brought into being under a Tory government. And what that does is make crystal clear that the police must prioritise accusations of racism. And this is why it's actually really important, Cathy, because you're talking about the politicisation of this. The reality is that the only way we are going to prevent systematic racism against any race or any religion inside the police is through political action. I'm sure you agree with that, because you've expended considerable amounts of your own energy in pursuit of that, but it only seems to be in one direction.
Zia, you know, this is a bit like this interview, but you know the police action plan was brought in to address decades of racism against black and minority ethnic people by the police. So that was why it was to correct an imbalance there that had lasted for decades. Do you accept that that was necessary?
Legislation and initiatives like that must be judged on the impact that they have and the outcomes that they create, not the intentions of those that created them. I'm not impugning the intentions of the people who created all of that, but what is crystal clear is that what we saw in that harrowing, distressing, and tragic body cam footage is directly downstream. And anyone watching this, whether you agree with the reform or not, I encourage you to go and read the race action plan on Hampshire Police's website. Go and read that in full. It's not a particularly long page, but there's a lot there. And what it makes crystal clear is that the reaction of the police, the fact that that footage proves that the burden of proof for a man making an accusation of racism was zero. Henry was arrested pretty much immediately, even as he was bleeding to death. Yet the burden of proof for Henry in saying repeatedly that I've been stabbed was such that the police responded as he bled to death by handcuffing him and saying, I don't think you have, mate. And Cathy, I put it to you as you know, human to human, if you can't see that as evidence of anti-white discrimination in the conduct of those attending officers, then I'm afraid we cannot have been watching the same footage.
See, we've discussed that at length, and I wonder, given your concern about, understandable concern about the body cam footage, whether you've been in touch with the family, whether Nigel Farage has been in touch with the family and asked them whether this is what they wanted, this debate.
I haven't been, and I'm not going to comment on Nigel's confidential and private conversations. I don't think that that is appropriate, but my convictions around this issue and Nigel's convictions around this issue are around ensuring that we have one law for everybody. And, you know, you put to me earlier, you know, am I concerned about discrimination against ethnic minorities? But to the degree that that is happening, of course I'm concerned by it, Cathy. But
Zia,
we are making an argument based on the footage. It is an 18-year-old student who happens to be white who has just been murdered, and was the last words he heard on this earth were his rights being read to him by British police officers who did not believe him when he told them that they had been stabbed. And I'm afraid,
many
Cathy,
times. I very much
what
appreciate you being with us tonight. It's a shame you couldn't be on the sofa, but thank you very much for joining us. Very brief word, Thangam, your reaction to what you've just heard.